On September 24, 2014, it was reported that a 20-year-old man, known as Maqsood, either jumped or fell into the tiger enclosure at the New Delhi Zoo in India. If the 16 or so foot fall into the pen wasn't bad enough, he would soon find himself face to face with the iconic 6 foot, 400-pound white tiger, Vijay, who spotted the man's fall and came running to him. As the other patrons of the zoo watched on in horror, some would begin to record, and one would capture this iconic photo. I think this photo really speaks for itself. While some photos featured may need a little bit of explaining, this image alone says it all. Vijay, however, wouldn't immediately attack the man. Instead, just stare at him, inspect him, and look him over. In fact, he did this for several minutes. While this happened, the other guests started to yell, trying to get the tiger's attention, some even throwing rocks. This unfortunately may have been Maqsood's undoing, however, as it is believed that this yelling and rock throwing is what led to Vijay finally getting annoyed to the point that it would attack, mauling Maqsood and dragging him to the back of the enclosure. Of course, the moment he fell in, security was alerted and an SOS was sent over the zoo's radio system, but after only minutes, it was clear that Maqsood was dead as a result of the mauling. Reportedly, it would take several hours for the zoo to get Vijay back into his cage. To the best of my knowledge, Vijay the tiger was never retaliated against, and the zoo denied any wrongdoing since Maqsood climbed the standoff barrier before falling in. Maqsood's own family claims that he'd been mentally ill since the age of 11, but said they never expected he was capable of doing something like this. To this day, it is unclear whether Maqsood was drunk, mentally disturbed, or simply fell on accident. On October 29, 2013, 4 engineers would climb a 260-foot tall wind turbine in order to perform routine maintenance. But after a short circuit in the engine room, only 2 would make it out alive. After a short circuit, a fire erupted at the top of the turbine. 2 engineers were safely able to make it down off the turbine by jumping through the flames before they got too strong. But 21-year-old R.J. Cordes and 19-year-old Dan Kaus were trapped up top, with the vicious flames now blocking their only exit. While the fire grew, someone would capture this photo of the 2 men standing on top of the wind turbine at Delta Wind's Piet de Wit wind farm in Holland, hugging. This image is especially powerful, as the 2 likely knew that they would not be making it off the turbine alive. Reportedly, the turbine was equipped with a mechanism to help engineers rappel down should an emergency occur, but it was located on the other side of the fire as well. Now, the 2 young men had very difficult decisions to make. One would choose to attempt to make it through the flames to the staircase down below, but would ultimately succumb to the fire, and the other would choose to jump. Firefighters were quick to arrive on the scene, but were simply unequipped to handle a fire located roughly 260 feet above them. As a result, the fire was not actually extinguished until hours later. An investigation reportedly revealed that the fire was in fact caused by a short circuit, and although the crew seemed to have properly shut down the turbine, may have inadvertently caused a short circuit by dropping a tool. Delta Wind was also determined to have not broken any laws regarding safe workplace conditions, and thus was not held accountable for the 2 men's deaths. A disturbing example of when something so routine can turn deadly. This next picture features what appears to be a little black-eyed girl lurking through the water, but the truth behind it is actually far more tragic, disturbing, and sad. The little girl in the photo is Amira Sanchez, a 13-year-old girl from Colombia. A nearby volcano had erupted just days prior, resulting in a landslide burying around 80% of her town with mud and water. While Sanchez was home with her father, aunt, and brother, the house collapsed, killing her father and aunt. Sanchez would survive the initial collapse and would get the attention of the rescue team, only for them to realize the grisly condition she was in. A door made of bricks was pinning Sanchez down. It was ultimately determined that she could not be removed, as each attempt would simply allow more water to come in, and any hope to amputate her legs would ultimately be in vain, as the government failed to properly prepare for such a disaster, and the doctors on site lacked the equipment needed. As awful as it may sound, the doctors decided that the most humane thing they could do for her would be to just let her die. By the time French photographer Frank Fournier arrived and took these photos, she had already almost been trapped for 3 days and was close to succumbing to the elements. her eyes blackened by what was believed to be a lack of oxygen going to her head. Some would call Frank a vulture since he chose to document Sanchez's situation, but is quoted as saying, "I felt the story was important for me to report, and I was happier that there was some reaction. It would have been worse if people had not cared about it. I believe the photo helped raise money from around the world in aid and helped highlight the irresponsibility and lack of courage of the country's leaders." Around 10 a.m. on November 16th, Omayra Sanchez died, most likely either through gangrene or hypothermia, according to various news sources. Although she sometimes would express fear and even cry, it was reported that Sanchez remained mostly upbeat throughout the 60 hours she suffered, being described as showing courage and dignity throughout. The photo of Sanchez would be spread around the world, and in 1986 even win the World Press Photo of the Year. On August 15th, 1998, Gonzalo Quevedo posed with an unidentified child on the streets of Northern Ireland. Unknown to Gonzalo, however, as well as just about every person in that town, located just 68 miles west of Belfast, was that the maroon 1991 Vauxhall Cavalier sitting behind them was just moments away from exploding. You see, for many years, Ireland had been stuck in a bloody conflict known as the Troubles, which essentially boiled down to the desire for Northern Ireland to either join the Republic of Ireland or remain part of the UK. But truthfully, it's more complicated than that. One such group that was involved in the conflict and was looking to remove Northern Ireland from British control was the Irish Republican Army, a paramilitary group made up of about 10,000 heavily armed individuals initially planning to remove UK's influence by force. After almost 40 years in conflict, however, things seemed to be coming to a close, as talks and agreements were happening to end the bloodshed. But not every member of the IRA was open to this solution. The end result would be several members creating their own splinter group known as the Real Irish Republican Army, who planned to continue the IRA's violent campaign. On August 15th, the Real IRA contacted authorities 3 times before the explosion to give hints. Omagh Town, 13 minutes, and one saying that the bomb would go off on the main street about 200 yards from the town's courthouse. The police acted quickly and began to usher civilians away from the area, but unfortunately would make a fatal mistake, as it would turn out that the Real IRA's warnings were actually unintentionally misleading, since Omagh didn't have a main street. This led police to lead civilians from the area they believed the bomb to be into the area where the bomb actually was. At 3:10 p.m., the Cavalier was detonated with over 300 pounds of explosives in the back, resulting in over 200 injuries and 29 deaths. Miraculously, Gonzalo and the child in the photo would both survive, but the attack would claim the life of the person behind the camera. I was unable to find information on who captured this photo, but after looking through the bios of the 29 victims, I came across one named Julia Hughes, a 21-year-old student who was working at a photography shop in town for the summer. But again, I don't have any specific evidence that Julia was the one who took this photo. The Real IRA would claim responsibility for the attack, but say that they never intended to kill anyone, and issued an apology. Over the years, several men have been accused and charged in having a hand in the including one who was charged with 29 counts of murder, but was set free after a key witness gave inconsistent evidence and contradicted his previous testimony. This ultimately means that no one has been convicted in 1998 that took 29 lives. On February 20th, 2003, the Station nightclub suffered a fire that would claim the lives of 100 patrons as well as injure 230 more. The Rhode Island nightclub that was built in 1946 was hosting a performance of the band Great White, a Los Angeles rock band that was formed in 1977 and first gained prevalence in the 1980s. While performing their first song, pyrotechnics would be set off by the band's tour manager, causing acoustic foam to catch fire. These events were captured on camera by several concertgoers, including this photo taken just as the fire began. The unfortunate part, however, was that even though the building had 4 exits available to guests, the crowd was either largely unaware or, in the craziness of the situation, panicked and simply headed to the main entrance of the building. The end result was what is known as a crush, meaning the crowd became so packed in the narrow hallway, not only were they preventing movement forward, but they were also restricting their own ability to breathe. It was also reported that the venue was above the capacity allowed, meaning over 400 people were inside. As previously stated, this incident resulted in the deaths of 100 people. Half of all survivors received some kind of injury. The band's lead guitarist, Ty Longley, would also perish in the fire, although it is believed he initially made it out safely before returning inside to get his guitar. It was also reported that a bouncer allegedly refused to allow people to exit through the stage door, as he said it was for the band only. Since the fire, Great White has done multiple benefit tours to support the families of the victims, and say that they have never performed the song Desert Moon, the song they were playing when the fire started, since. Both the tour manager and the 2 owners of the club would plead guilty or no contest to charges they faced after the incident, but would ultimately receive suspended sentences. Well, that's it for now. Be sure to like the video to help the algorithm, and subscribe to see more content like this. If you enjoyed this video and haven't seen it yet, check out my last video where I talk about 5 photos taken by serial killers. I'll see you next time.